Hi, thanks for joining me. We're going to talk about security risk. And on the agenda, we're going to talk about threats, vulnerability, likelihood, potential impact, and business context. That includes the outcome of the harms, and then really what risk is and treatments. So starting with threat, this is really anything that could act on a vulnerability and which could result in a harm impact. Examples are cyber terrorist, a nation state, organized crime, hacktivists, insiders, thrill seekers, and possibly something automated like malware. Vulnerabilities are next on the list. Here we have some form of a weakness that has an exposure, making it susceptible to attack from a threat. Often we find vulnerabilities on networks and operating systems and software. Could be because of out-of-date patch levels, could be because of configuration. Possibly there's a vulnerability in a process, could be a vulnerability from a human being, or something that's embedded in your supply chain. All of these aspects need to be looked at. Let's talk about likelihood. This is the interplay between the threat and the vulnerability. First thing to ask yourself is, does a threat exist? And if it does, what's the level of the threat? How determined is that threat? What is the value of your system to that threat actor? And does the threat actor have tools to do something? Do they have the skills and the know-how? Are there any real-world recent examples of where a threat has targeted similar systems and similar organizations to yours? Next is, does a vulnerability exist that threat actor can go against, right? What is the level of the vulnerability and what mitigating controls do you have? How effective are your controls and how exposed is your system? How weak is it? How easy would it be to leverage the vulnerability or use that vulnerability? These are all aspects of likelihood. If we bucketize potential harm impacts, normally in security, we look at confidentiality, integrity, and availability. But to give this meaning, we need to take it one step further and apply a business context. So the outcome of the harms to your business could be harm to health and safety or life. Could be a financial harm. Could be a reputational harm, a compliance harm, some form of a harm to your customers or clients. There could even be some more broader legal harm that could occur. If you're a supplier to another organization, a risk to you could actually be a supply chain harm to them. Also, it's potential that you have systems that manage your facilities, that type of thing. So if a harm occurred, maybe your facilities could be impacted. Give some thought to what the risk means to your organization. And, would a compromise of the system and a breach of the information mean something significant to your organization? You need to give some thought to what this means to your organization. What are the potential repercussions if you did nothing? If you didn't do anything about this risk, what could occur, right? So you're wanting to give some very careful thought to that. And also, don't just stop there. Give some thought to what harms could occur to your organization if the attacker established control of the system and was it maybe able to laterally move on your network and attack more critical systems. What harms could occur to your organization then? So to sum it up, a risk is an understanding of how likely a threat is to leverage a vulnerability, and the potential impact gets considered and then understood as to what it would mean to your organization if the harm was to occur. A risk statement that you would capture as part of a risk assessment, it bundles all of these elements together. Finally, once you have identified a risk, you should be looking at the treatment. So the goal of a treatment is that a risk is brought to an acceptable level to the organization. Treatment types for risks can occur remediation, which means to fix, But more often than not, you're looking at a mitigation, which means you're simply looking to reduce the level of that risk to that acceptable level. Sometimes too, people may look at just limiting their liability. Oftentimes they'll look at transferring risk for that, and that can sometimes be insurance. Avoiding risk is also a potential treatment. This is where you change the conditions around a risk so that the risk simply doesn't apply to you anymore, or you've reduced how much it applies to you. But again, that's by changing the circumstance. And if the risk is at an acceptable level already, it's possible that the accountable individual may just simply choose to accept the risk as is without any further treatment. But normally by the time you reach this point in an assessment with assessing a risk, there's normally something there, and at least you're probably going to want to try to reduce that risk in some way. Thanks very much for joining me today to talk about risk really briefly, and I hope you got something out of this. Thank you.